right, bro. Welcome back to the Real Talk podcast number 2. Um, got Hunter Sherill here, aka Sharon. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, bro.
This is kind of weird. This is like in between this. All right, bro. I kind of wanted to talk about I guess relationship type stuff today.
Mm-hmm.
So do you just want to we can get straight into it and talk about um how did that affect your walk with God? I don't know which one you want to talk about, if you want to get into it deeper and
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, so I've been in 3 relationships. The second one that I was in has probably affected my walk with God the most, because that's probably where I strayed the most. Well, we started dating in high school. It was my junior year, and I, to be honest, looking back now, the girl I was dating, I look back now and I'm able to analyze more of kind of how it went, and I can look and I can say, man, I think I was more focused on attraction rather than, us agreeing on things spiritually that we should have. And so that kind of led me down a path of just kind of being far from God, and kind of doing my own thing in a way, and kind of being ruled by the flesh and not by the things the Bible tells you to be ruled by. And in terms of relationships, I ignored a lot of signs and a lot of things that um, you know are super important, and I just kind of let those go by the wayside, and it kind of ended me up astray. And I can officially say that was probably my rock bottom, as some people say, in that relationship. I basically very, very early on, just being teenagers and having that love feeling and stuff. We were like, oh yeah, we're gonna get married and everything. 2 or 3 months in, and I bought into that, and so did she, and everything, and just it became super unhealthy and codependent. We couldn't go 5 minutes or without Snapchatting or texting each other and stuff like that, and it just became very codependent. And it got to the point where my parents were having to tell me, like, dude, you're spending way more time with her than you are with your family, which is super unhealthy, by the way. And so it took a lot of wake up calls, especially from my parents, but most importantly from God.
What do you think were signs that he gave you or something? Because you said there were signs that you feel like you
yeah. Well, number one, for the most part, is I started actually listening to the convictions I've had from the Holy Spirit, and things we agreed with. I think nowadays people will try, in terms of sex in a relationship, and that thing, that they'll try to get as close to the line as they possibly can. And that's kind of what happened with me until I started getting in the Bible again, and in Matthew it tells you not to have, not even a hint of sexual immorality. Well, even getting close to that line is definitely over a hint. And
Sure.
So I'm like, we're doing this stuff, and before it was just it's fine, it's to be expected. I started to get convicted about it, and I talked to her about it. I was like, hey, this stuff that we're doing is it's not godly, and it's sin, as the Bible calls it. And it convicted me. I was like, we have to stop. And her response was, it doesn't really bother me at all. And that was a sign for me that, hey, she's not in the right spot right now, and this is not good. But I continued to ignore it, and so that was one sign.
So were you reading your Bible earlier on in the relationship, or did you just kind of pick it back up, your reading time?
Yeah, I was picking back up my reading time, and I probably should have started with this earlier. But I kind of thought everything was going great. My relationship with God was not quite where it needed to be. It was, I may have picked up my Bible occasionally, but it may have just kind of been to read it and say I read it, not really as a relationship. Because in my head, I'm not really focused on God. I'm focused on her. And so the focus was not there. And so, reading this and reading that, it was super convicting to me. And, I didn't listen. And, but the more I continued to read and actually want that connection, the further on it went, the more convicted that I felt about just everything, about the stuff that we were doing. Eventually, it turned to the music she was listening to that convicted me a lot. Just a bunch of garbage. And when I confronted her about it, she said she didn't have a problem with it at all. And that was
well, like she would play it in the car and you didn't like it.
Yeah, so like there were times in like before a basketball game or in my truck, it would just be super inappropriate songs. And there was at one point, and I kind of felt bad at first, just because like I kind of went off in a way, and just like, how can you have the Holy Spirit in you and listen to this music and not be convicted? Which I'm saying that and not having the best relationship with God myself. And so, but her response was just like, it doesn't affect me at all, or it just doesn't have the same effect on me, or I can listen to it without listening to the sexual content of it, the cuss words and stuff. And I'm just kind of at a loss and everything. And all at the same time, I'm thinking, oh yeah, we agree we're going to marry each other and everything, and this is all going to be great and stuff. Which, do not ever do that. Like, date to marry, obviously, but 2 or 3 months in, especially in high school,
no idea who they are.
You have no idea who they are. You've not been with them long enough to a point to where you can determine, this question, especially, for like the rest of your life. I would say after a year, if you don't know, there's a problem, but definitely not that early on. But either way, those are some of the signs. And it got to the point to where I was laying in my bed one night, and I remember the exact date. It was July 2nd, 2023. I was laying in my bed, and this is the only time I've actually ever heard the voice of God, like verbally. And he was like, break up with her. And I heard that, and I almost kind of freaked out, because in my head, I'm like, oh no, like we're gonna get married and everything. Like, this can't happen.
Did you have a doubt that like it wasn't him, or it was your own voice, or like?
No, I knew it was him. Like, just
what made you know it was him?
There was there was a sternness in that voice, and it was something that I could not replicate with just my head.
Sure.
And because I tried to replicate what I heard with my head, and it wasn't the same. There was just this sternness and just conviction after I heard it, because it's something I never really thought of before breaking up with her. And like, and when I heard that, it just kind of rocked my world, because like, no, like this isn't my plan. My plan's got to work. And with that, it was pushed back towards it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that, and that night's when I had my first panic attack. And that's when I started experiencing like severe anxiety, and just could not stop thinking about this one thing that happened. And at that point, I finally told her and was like, hey, like, this happened to me and everything. And at first she was trying to be like, oh, it's just your anxiety. And like, at that point, she didn't hear the voice that I heard and everything. And it's not really about the voice that I heard, but it's about why I did. It was kind of me pushing away all of these signs that say like, hey, like, this isn't good for you. You need to leave this. And but at the time, she just thought it was my anxiety and everything. And we kind of worked through it. And there got to a point where it just was steady on my heart the entire time. And I couldn't do it
How
anymore.
long did you go, like, after hearing that you kept going?
Almost 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks of just kind of like, oh, it's my anxiety, or, oh, like, I'll get on medication, or, to feel like that was going to fix it. And after that, I finally told her, I was like, hey, like, I'm done, like, I'm finished. And When I told her that, I'm not going to say exactly what she said, but I basically told her, I was like, you need God, and so do I, and you know, we just need to I need to focus on myself right now, and so do you. And yeah, after that, it ended, and I made the mistake again of running back after a month's time. Um, and that was one mistake that I did make, is I didn't close the door and leave it shut. A lot of times people will leave the door open in spots like that where um, they know a relationship is super unhealthy, but the door is left open, and they get back into it. And it, for me, we got back into a relationship, and it was the same old stuff. We couldn't stop ourselves from sinning. Um,
How do you think you could do better at like closing the door and like not going back to it?
so, in which I did get better at this as time went on, but um, probably the best way for me, and this is what I did. I blocked her on literally everything. At the time, I deleted all my social media, blocked her number, and it was hard because we went to school together. We were still in high school, and we had lockers right next to each other, and
Oh wow.
it was hard, um, But I every time like I saw her, and or maybe I thought like gosh, she's really pretty and stuff. I'd always remind myself, I'm like, bro, it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more
Sure.
than looks. But yeah, probably the easiest way to do that is kind of just like cut everything off in terms of communication. As long as that door is left open, and in her mind, she was still thinking, like we had a chance, and that it was still like destiny for us to get married, and everything, because like that's what we talked about, and it's super unhealthy to talk about all that, especially at the age in high school that you are at.
You're a senior, right?
Yes, at the time I was going into my senior year. um, but yeah, it was super unhealthy to talk about all that stuff, and it just kind of planted in my mind that all this has got to happen and stuff, and it just shows that I wasn't trusting God, I was trusting myself, and kind of what I had planned, and
Mm-hmm.
you know it didn't work out, and God had different plans, and he showed me a lot, and I grew a lot through the relationship. But yeah, I just had to close the door, and I had to move on. And there were times where she did try to reach back out and everything, and um, I just had to tell her, I've said everything I need to say, and we need to move on. Um, but that's
How'd she reach back out when you had her blocked?
so. Yeah, this part it really got under my skin. I didn't like it a lot, but she had my parents' numbers and was texting them, and
Oh
would
wow.
text back and forth with my dad. It just made me super uncomfortable.
What'd your dad say? Because your
Um,
parents were both kind of like thinking it was a bad idea.
yeah, in which now, like, I hope she is doing well. I hope she is finding her way and is finding God. But at the time, I just kind of knew it was right for us to split. Um, but yeah, just communicating with my parents, and they at the time didn't think a whole lot about it. They just thought it was just like, hey, she's still communicating and everything. To me, it was like that door was still open, and if she was like her communicating with them showed that she still had interest, and still wanted that. And like, I did not want that. I wanted it completely shut, because if she's still focused on me, then she can't move on too.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Did you
there
tell
was
them to
that.
block her? Or?
I did eventually, and they thought I was being very um, not unrealistic, but just kind of thought I was being,
Brash? Or?
yeah, kind of brash, and just kind of harsh when saying that, like it's not a big deal. And I'm like, look, with everything that I've gone through, I just want to be done, and I want to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually that they finally did. And then it had to do with also social media to just still follow my family and everything like that. um, but yeah, those were kind of the ways, and I just kind of explained to them like, hey, like I really don't like this, and it's just time for me to move on.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have issues with blocking people because they're just like they think the same thing. I think it's too harsh, or they make these excuses. But I think it's more than that. I think it's like a subconscious decision to leave the door open because they just want to have that sliver of hope in the back of their head that somehow it's still gonna work.
Yeah, and like I maybe can understand that, but at the same time, if that's in God's plan and that's going to happen and everything, at least for me, it's you can't leave the door open and continue to stay in the sin that you were in.
It's the same thing with any kind of sin. You have to
cut
flee
it
from
off.
it. You have to
Flee.
figure some way to make it impossible to fall into that.
Yeah. And so that's what I tried to do, and I like I said, I hope she's doing well, and I hope she's doing great, and finding God and finding her way, and everything. But just in terms of us, it didn't work out, and just I learned a lot from it. I'm the man who I am today. Like I would consider like after that probably like my rock bottom, my darkest spot, because I was having to try to figure out who I was again apart from someone else. And that's where like the codependency part comes in, is just not being able to, spend time alone and spend time with my family and with friends and stuff. Is that like, that's one thing, a relationship is in a bad spot when you completely cut off everybody that cares about you and you choose to spend more time with someone else than with them. I remember a specific conversation I had with my mom, and she was just like, "You're never home anymore. You're always spending time with her, and like chores at home aren't getting done. It's just all her, and you're making no time for us and your family and stuff like that." And she started crying, and that like at the time I was kind of like cold hearted towards it, like she didn't understand, like what I'm, like I love her, obviously I want to spend as much time with her as I can. But looking back on it now, I understand where she was coming from. And like, there's a lot of people that tried to tell me, like, just tell me things like, hey, like you need to stop spending so much time with her. And I wouldn't listen. I would think that they're crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. I think
when you see that, that's when like it's turning into an idol of some sort.
Absolutely, an idol, and you don't want that in a relationship. You want someone that can walk alongside you, but at the same time, you need to learn to be independent of each other. That's why I say when I've learned a lot from that, I absolutely did. I learned, what the right way to go about a relationship is, how much time needs to be spent together. Especially at the young age, like I'm 20 years old, like I'm, working a lot and just trying to find my own way in my career and everything. And personally, I feel like for me, if I had a girlfriend right now, it probably would not be the most helpful thing. Now it depends, obviously, but I would just say you need to regulate the time that you spend with each other, especially at this young of age. And that's one thing I had to learn, because the more time you spend with each other, the more likely you are to fall into sin. And
especially early on when you're not.
Yes, especially early on, and especially if you were in my spot and your relationship with God was not the best, and I'd never experienced pleasure like that, or never experienced just that like feeling of like first love per se, in terms of that way. And whenever you feel that, it's like you want more, you can't get enough in a way. And that's why in the Bible, a lot of people, they don't know why, or they don't understand why the Bible's like, yeah, wait till marriage. I'm like, like, why wouldn't I test drive the car first? Or why, why this, why that? And I'm like, well, there's a reason. You ever heard of a soul tie?
I've heard of it before.
Yeah, but
I think it's true.
Basically, I mean, it was for me. Even though like we never fully crossed that line, just the codependency, how close that we were. I was wondering even why, after we broke up, I was like, like, why do I still think about her all the time? Why do I still want to be with her? even though I know it's not good and that I can't go back. And it took me a while to get over it, but that's the effect of that. That's why in marriage, that's why that's only reserved for marriage. That way it can keep, sorry, I just looked at the fire. But like, that's why in marriage, that when that is used in marriage, that it's supposed to keep couples together longer, and it's supposed to form a stronger bond. It's not meant for outside of marriage, because look what happens when something falls through. Like when you're cohabitating and something falls through, and you're having to completely, split things 50-50, and you're having to pick yourself back up again. It's the same thing. It's got to be in marriage, and it's got to be where there's boundaries and where it can be fruitful and help you stay together and raise a family. So
no, I think there's a lot of things in the Bible where it's like, wait till marriage. Like, you think about living with each other, and you don't really understand it until you either learn the hard way, or like you obey it, and then you get to that situation, you're like married, and you realize why. Because like,
yeah,
I mean, you can know this like firsthand. I can too, from like people at work. There's been multiple people I've seen that have lived together before they were married, and it's just gone,
unfortunately,
like horribly wrong.
Yeah, and it's like you want to tell them that, but you have to have that relationship with them for them to trust you to be able to tell them that. But yeah, I definitely did learn. I definitely had some moments where it was like, oh, so that's why that's why I wait till marriage. Oh, that's why I don't do things like this. Or I learned a lot, and there was a lot that I did that was kind of like, I'm going to do this for her in a way. Before, I never had social media ever. When I started liking her and stuff, and I got Instagram, and because I liked her, I downloaded Snapchat. And
did you still have Snapchat afterwards, or did you get rid of it?
Okay, so that's another thing. I don't have Snapchat now, and part of the reason for that is number one, it's super addicting. But number two, even after we broke up, I almost treated it like a dating app. How many girls can I put on here and snap and get attention and everything like that? Like, that's genuinely what I used it for.
I just feel like that's what it turns into every single time.
Yeah,
that's why I was gonna ask you that, because that's what it was for me for like a long time.
Yeah, it was like a dating app, and my heart was still not in. My heart was still in, I need someone else, and not fully, I need God yet. God had pulled me out, but I wasn't at the point to where I was like, yeah, I only need you and stuff. Like, I was giving him credit, but I wasn't. I was already focused on the next, who my next girlfriend's gonna. You know what I'm saying? And that's a terrible mindset to have.
True.
And so, but I still did. I still did have Snapchat and Instagram a little bit afterwards, but there was a point in my life where I was like, you know what, for a while I'm done, and I deleted it.
What made you decide that, and like, how long did it take?
Well, I decided that maybe a month or two after we broke up, just because. So where I went to school was a super small school. We graduated with 42 or 44 kids, and everyone knew everything, and everyone knew everything about everyone. And I loved my school, but that was one of the things where it was just like, if something happened, then everyone knew about it. Everyone had their opinion, and so I was hearing everyone's opinions, even from my friends. And just, I'll never forget one of the things one of my friends told me. It made me so furious at them, and I won't say it on here, but
was it against you, or?
It was just having to do with the relationship. It was nothing having to do like with
of how he thought you handled it or something.
Well, yeah, it had to do with how I handled it. But at the same time, I'm like, they didn't know what I went through to get to this point and everything. And so, but even at school, I thought in my head, and this may not have been true, I'm like, I feel like everyone's against me. I don't feel like people like me as much. And so I just kind of went into a shell. I kind of just went to school, did my own thing, went to baseball practice, and then after that left and went home. And like, I didn't really want to talk to anybody or anything. I just kind of wanted to focus on myself. The good news is at that time I was reading my Bible a lot more, and that was kind of keeping me occupied and not just the attention of other people. But at that point when I was just kind of like, like I'm just kind of done with everyone and everything, that's when I deleted that and deleted all of it and said, like I'm just fully done, and I'm gonna focus on God, and because He's the only thing that's satisfying my soul right now, and not other people. So
true, bro. True. I can relate to the cutting people off for the girl and all that kind of thing, because I did that for a while too, around like actually the same time period that you were going through that, like 2023 summer. It was like my junior year summer, and I was doing the same bull crap, bro. I was like saying my friends are stupid, they're fake or whatever. They didn't even really do anything. I can really remember.
Yeah, I was gonna say my friends didn't really do anything.
I just quit wanting to hang out with them, and just every second I would try and fit in whatever I could to go and hang out with that person. It just it was not right, bro.
And
it's the texting all the time too. It's like the nonstop on the phone. Like, dude, I remember I was coming home from Florida, driving all the way from Florida back to Illinois. The entire car ride, like since she got up at like 9 a.m. or 8 or whatever, the entire car ride home,
I can relate,
text on that phone, bro.
I
don't even know what there was to talk about, bro, and I was text on that phone.
I can relate, and there's been so many times my parents have told me, like, like, why don't you stop texting her, or why do you have to text her nonstop? Why do you have to snap? And the answer is you don't. You don't have to do that. You can have lives. You can do things. You don't have to text each other every second. And the thing is that you don't have to get mad if they don't respond to you in a certain amount of time, or heaven forbid you spend some time with with yourself and with God and and with your family and your friends, and you don't tell them what you're doing, right? That's where the codependency part comes in. Is you tell them, oh, I'm doing this at this time, and this is who I'm doing it with, and I'll be gone for this amount of time. If I don't text back for this amount of time, be worried. You know what I'm saying? Like that's basically what it got to. And then just the Snapchat, and every time, this is another one of my opinions, but having Snapchat makes hanging out in aside from on the phone, but together, it makes it worse, because you keep seeing their face all the time. And when you spend time, the more time you spend, texting on your phone and Snapchatting, the less
takes away from like
the less desirable it is to hang out in person. And
like the authenticity of it, or whatever.
And it causes you to just be like, oh, like I just want to fool around and do this stuff and not have genuine conversations about things.
True.
And that's kind of what happened. And
because you see people like just texting all day long with each other. They're getting all their talking out, and then they go hang out with each other, and then they just sit and scroll next to each other. It's like, what kind of hangout even is it?
That or they're making out, or they're filling their time with stuff, or all the time it's just, let's just go chill and snuggle and watch a movie and everything. And I'm just like there's a time for that, and early dating stages, a few months in, is not it is not where that needs to be happening. It early on, and
I think you need to be having conversations, digging to figure out if this is even worth like spending
who this person is.
True.
And for me, that's something I didn't do as much. It was all surface level conversations and everything, and more like the physical aspect and the more feeling, and that just affected me, because I had never felt anything like that, or like, oh my gosh, she loves me, she says she wants to marry me, she thinks I'm great, and everything.
I think everybody
and
goes through some sort of phase like that,
and everyone does. And it, like I said, it was a huge learning experience for me.
Was that your first? That was your second?
That was my second. So that was my second. And after everything that went down in that one, I didn't date anyone for about a year.
The reason I asked that is because me and my friends said the same, that we would be like, well, it's his first relationship, so he's consumed, because it was just a thing, like your first girlfriend like consumes you, and it's kind of true.
It was my second one, surprisingly.
Maybe because that was your first like real like.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. It was a lot more. I felt like a lot more serious, like a lot faster. the one I had previously, we took things a lot slower. We would hang out, kind of like once every weekend and stuff. And which looking back is a lot more healthy than kind of what I was doing before. But
something I want to add though,
real
quick before we move into that is like, I know we don't live in the 1980s anymore, but I feel like it's so much more healthier. Like, I don't know, you look at like the divorce rate and how long it takes for people to get married nowadays and all that stuff. Like, I feel like it's so much more healthier back then when people were like having to maybe call each other like at the end of the day of school, or like call each other like just they would call each other. That'd be about it, and then they would go like see each other like once a week, and that was it.
Yeah.
They'd maybe hang out in person at school a little bit, but they really weren't up each other's butt like that. You know what I mean? Like,
and that honestly it is very healthy. It's very healthy. And looking back at it definitely is not what I was doing. It was like you said, kind of up each other's butt, and even my dad would make comments and just like like you don't always have to be up her butt about everything. And
no, I get you're like supposed to be one flesh, but you're not even married yet.
Not this early, bro.
You're not even married yet, so it's like
not this early.
And you're supposed to be two.
I will touch on that though, about kind of like the calling at the end of the night. So there was a lot of times me and her would stay up late, FaceTime and everything like that, and sometimes that's cool, and fine and stuff.
Not the falling asleep on FaceTime.
Not the falling asleep on FaceTime and that kind of
just
thing.
Just maybe a little call, like checking up, saying how the day was. And
and I feel like a lot of times, not that I was pressured, but I felt obligated to always call when they wanted to call, or stay on FaceTime for a long time, and just talk about and not want to go to bed and everything. And like I missed so much sleep because of that. Like there was one night where stayed up all night and everything, and like literally woke up, had workouts and stuff in the morning, and I just was so tired all day long. But like it needs to be a lot more, in my opinion, like kind of like a check-in, like maybe 20 or 30 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, it shouldn't be something that like interrupts your day, or you have to like.
And to be honest, I made me and her both just made a habit out of just hours on FaceTime every single night, and that's just super. Because here's kind of what we were doing. It's like we were playing married already,
basically. Because were you even like talking that much, or were you just listening to each other breathe? You're just like there.
We did do that occasionally, but yeah, it's almost like we were playing married, and we were married, but that takes away from actual marriage later.
Exactly. Takes away like the exclusivity of it, and then also like it's like with the living together thing. You're together, but there's no obligation. If something goes wrong, adios,
bye,
bro.
I'm gone, and
you already have separate bank accounts. You're already chilling. Adios.
I mean, you're just kind of mooching off each other. I mean, that's kind of what it is.
Pretty much, you're just your roommates. You're sharing.
Yeah. So, but either way, yeah, I learned a lot from that, and just basically now looking back and saying, I mean, I spent all that time on FaceTime talking to her and everything, when that time could be spent getting closer to God, and I didn't have the guts to say like, hey, I'm not going to do this tonight because I need to do other things, or I'm not, because I kind of felt obligated to stay on and not. But as men, we need to be the ones to say that and say like, I got to do this, and
you wouldn't have gone through that and learned the lesson if you hadn't.
True, and that's very true. And I guess that's one other thing I want to touch on is in terms of like spiritually, I think you need to have separate spiritual lives, until, you're close to kind of talking about getting married, engaged. And, I don't think you should be praying together. I think you should have separate spiritual. I think you should have separate spiritual lives, because, when you're praying together, you're spiritually coming together, and that affects kind of your connection with them. And it's almost like, because, sexual activity is it's a spiritual act as well. And it affects you in your mind and in a spiritual way, and it binds two people together.
Mm-hmm.
And if early on, if you're praying together and you're doing that other stuff together, it affects your ability to think clearly. And so you may not even be able to hear, God saying, God's conviction and God saying like, hey, you know, I see these things right here. It causes you just to want to ignore them because you're already so connected.
Makes sense.
That's why I
Do
say
you think
that
you should pray for each other separately?
you should pray for each other separately. And not saying they can't hear you pray or anything, but in terms of like coming together and praying for like your future and praying for, I think that should be done separately, because people are going to hear different things from God at times, and one may be saying, hey, this isn't it, and one may be saying, that they feel like God's telling them this is what they need to do. And and in that relationship, she told me that, like, I feel God wants us to get married, and I feel like this is what God wants me to do. I was not hearing that. We were hearing two different voices.
And was she really hearing that, or was she feeling?
And you know what? That's between her and God. God was telling me that I didn't need to be in that. The convictions that I had of the sin that was in my life, and just the no reliance on God, the codependency that me and her had, just that to me was telling me, I need to leave, and this is not good for me. And my life changed drastically after that. It got worse before it got better, but it absolutely got better. And I wouldn't be here today, without going through that rock bottom, that feeling lonely, the just kind of feeling like I'm an outcast, and just, no one understands the reason I did what I did. And that's not saying I didn't make mistakes too. I shouldn't have run back to her after 1 month, thinking that, like, oh, Satan's just trying to keep me away from her and everything. And that's literally what I thought at times was, like, this is actually God's plan, and Satan, just wants to, break it up and not let it happen and stuff. And we're like destined to be together and everything like that.
I think the biggest rule of thumb is like, now I made a video talking about this before, but if you're struggling to figure out if it's a sin or not, or if you're not supposed to do it or not, it's better just not do it.
Better just not do it.
It's probably a sin, bro.
So, but yeah, that's great advice to have, and great advice.
You wouldn't be tempted or like driven as much to think you have to do it if it weren't a sin.
Yeah, and kind of in terms of getting close to that line of and actually crossing it. The stuff at first, the stuff we were doing, I didn't think it was a problem because, number one, I'd never done it before. I'd never experienced anything like that before. In my head, it was just, oh well, it's not sex, so it's fine, and that was kind of my mindset going into it. But the more that kept going on, and the more we kept hanging out, and that's like we did something like that every time, and just the more that happened, the more convicted I kept becoming, because I knew after reading that in the Bible, and after like just I'd even look up on the internet, like is doing stuff like this a sin, and stuff like that. They would find me Bible passages and stuff, and I would reason like, okay, so it's not really a sin, because like I'm not fully having sex, but like I can keep doing it. But then the not a hint of sexual immorality really kicked in, and I'm like, bro, this is way more than a hint. Yeah. And so when that conviction set in, and I just like I had to follow it, because my spirit just couldn't handle it anymore. It was like, I got to stop doing this. Like, this has to stop. And even when we did get back together after a month, we just couldn't stop. Like, basically what we agreed to is like, oh, we'll try not to, but if it happens, we'll just forgive each other and ask for forgiveness and stuff, which is a terrible mindset to have. Like, just terrible. That should not be something in a relationship.
If you go on with like expecting to mess up, then you're gonna mess up. There's got to be something there. But now that I know all that went on in my life, now I know, number one, that
I need to focus on their relationship with God, personality, their heart for other people, more than physical attributes, more than how they make me feel all the time. I believe if all that other stuff lines up, then the mutual feelings for each other will continue to grow, and will continue to get better. But you can't just lead and start out with that.
True. No, let's go back to what you were starting to talk about like
Okay.
the third or whatever. Like, how did you lead into that? Is that your senior year or like
So that was the
end?
I'm trying to think. That was
How long of a break did you have?
Okay, so about a year, and I basically told myself I'm not dating anyone for a long time, and like I'm focusing on myself, I'm focusing on God and getting better, figuring out what my career was, and this it's not really off topic, but just kind of hitting in a little bit of what we talked about before. We fly on my head. But it basically got to the point to where she wanted me to go to college with her at A State and everything, and I bought into doing it and everything.
This was the summer after you graduated, right?
This was so the third relationship I got into was the summer. No, it was into my freshman year of college.
Okay.
But in terms of me and her talking about going to college and stuff, she wanted me to go there and everything, and like I'm telling my dad, like, yeah, I'm gonna go to A State with her and everything, and he's like, well, how you gonna pay for that? And I'm just like, like it'll be fine and stuff and everything, and he's telling me like, hey, you could go to this school for a lot less money, get your basics done, and then go somewhere else. And I'm just like, I'm so sold on doing that with her. And but thankfully it didn't happen because I wouldn't be where I am, and I wouldn't have completed, my associate's degree so far without that. So, but either way. So I told myself after, that happened, I was like, I'm not going to date anyone for a long time. I'm going to focus on God. I'm going to focus on myself. And I could have done that better. I really could have. But it definitely was a lot better. I definitely learned a lot through that time. But at my previous job before the one I'm at now,
in North Little Rock.
Not in North Little Rock. It was Davidson Cabot.
David's.
Yeah. So, but when I worked there was a girl that started working there, and I thought she was cute and everything, and we started talking a little bit and everything like that. I don't remember how it started. Just besides kind of knowing each other from work and that kind of thing. But we started talking and stuff and everything, and I was like, like I like her and everything, and I like her personality, soft, quiet, and everything like that, and so we hung out one time. We actually went to go hit golf balls, and so that was pretty fun. We had a good time there, and everything, and then eventually we started dating, and in my head, when we did started dating, I was like,
were you scared approaching this? Were you praying on it, or?
I did pray, and I did pray about it. Say, hey God, like I like this person, like what do you think and everything, and like I think at first like I was okay with it. I don't remember like specifically hearing God give me like a yes or a no, but like I felt fine about it. Was I a little scared? Yes, just because I knew what happened before. I was a little apprehensive and was basically telling myself, don't do it like you did last time. Do it differently. Do it how you've learned how to do it, and learn from the mistakes that you've made. And for the most part, I did do that. We dated for probably 2 or 3 months. And, I got caught back into the, the FaceTime every night kind of thing. And I just kind of felt obligated to, and I kind of felt like, like, hey, like, you don't need to be doing this like every night, like kind of you're getting too close too fast. And so we definitely didn't text each other nonstop like we did, in the previous relationship I was in which that was good. And I told her, I said, I'm not getting on Snapchat. I understand you have it and everything, but I'm not doing that. And at the time I still had no social media and stuff. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So yeah, we dated for about 2 or 3 months. The whole time I kind of just stayed apprehensive just because I kind of knew what happened before. But I thought it was going well. I invited her to church, or my church, and we went there and stuff and had a good time. And she'd come over to my house, meet my family, and I ended up meeting hers too. And I have another opinion on that in a little bit, but
all right.
But after about 2 months or so, I'm hyper visual because of, bro.
Oh, I gotta die, bro.
I was hyper visual just about kind of just trying to recognize things early on that I didn't like. And there were some things that she's told me and kind of some approaches to certain things that I saw that I just really didn't like and really was kind of convicted about. And I won't go like specifically into them, but there were just things I saw that were not good, and I didn't like it. And some people, they may be like pretty minute things, like, oh dude, it's not a big deal, like, why are you focused on that? But seeing those small things will help you reveal
about their heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I kind of saw those things, and like I said, it's about 2 or 3 months in, kind of close to the end. And I kind of saw those things, and I was like, in my head, I'm like, nah, dude, like, don't break up with her for that, and just small stuff like that, and everything. But it just kind of kept, poking at me, just thinking about those things. And like I said, even though they may be small, they still affected my heart, and just kind of made me think about it a lot. And so I talked to my mom about it specifically, and just about these things that I was noticing, and these things that I didn't like. And she kind of agreed with me and was like, like, those aren't the best qualities and stuff to have. And like, even though they're small, minute things, that they can lead to bigger things. And if you've noticed that right now, then what's to say something different might come in the future. And so I kind of talked to her and got advice, because I wasn't going to do something just lickety split off of thought or something that I had. And so but yeah, I broke up with her, and to be honest, it was completely different this time around than it was previously, because number one, we avoided sexual sin like before, or like I did before, or didn't do before. Avoided that, which was great. And we're definitely not as close as the second relationship I was in. And so it allowed me to think more clearly. And after we broke up, it allowed me to not, like, kind of just be stuck because of, like, man, this big, huge part of my life was just gone. Not that she was, like, at the time, not a big part in it, but
you weren't so attached.
I was not so attached, and but it was healthy in that way. And it kind of taught me,
you probably shouldn't be so attached if you're not married.
You should not be. You shouldn't be at all. And if you decide that, hey, this isn't going to work out or anything like that, it should be pretty. It shouldn't be like that hard on like your day-to-day life, your mind, and everything like that. And you still may think about her occasionally, but like, it shouldn't take that much of a toll on you. And praise God, it didn't really on me. I was able to move on at at a decent pace, and just kind of say like, hey God, I made this decision and stuff, and like pretty sure I made the right one and everything, and sought advice where I needed to seek advice at, and just like, hey, like I'm single. I'm gonna focus on you still, and continue to live my life the best I can. And hindsight, if I'd have still been in that, I believe I would not have been able to make certain decisions about kind of my career and what I wanted to do, and just kind of been able to think about all of these things, because I would have been focused on
going
her,
to school with her,
on going to, yeah. And so it's allowed me to think about the future. It allowed me to think about where I want to be and stuff like that. And so looking back on it, it was very helpful.
Dude, I had this one. This is like, I guess, my only real relationship, but I was so focused on her and being able to be around her that, dude, I almost didn't move here. I was trying to just find some, like, and I didn't even really know what I was going to go to school for, nor did I really want to go to school. I was like, oh, I'll probably just stay in Illinois, go to some school around here, so then I can be close to her. That was my only mindset. I had no idea what I was doing, but that's the only thing I was focused on. I think it's such a blinder to your life. It's just
terrible. It is, man. And
if that person's like holding you back in that way, that's not what your wife would do, bro. I'm just saying, like, that's not how it should be. That's when it's an idol, and it's not. It's not what it's supposed to be.
That person should encourage you to pursue your goals. And if they're gonna be with you there through that and encourage you through that, then that's a very good thing.
No, I'm not saying they were telling me to do that. It's just a mental thing that I was trying.
Yeah, gotcha. So, and I feel like a lot of people, nowadays, their first thought when they're coming out of high school is, hey, like, I'm going to go to this big college or big university, and there's going to be all the girls there, and I'm going to be able to, drink and party and just have a good time, and I'm going to be able to get all the girls I want.
And they're just putting off their future. They're not even, they're just putting a snoozer on it.
That's the best way to put it. And like, at the same time, it's not that like I kind of felt left out, but I was always in my head like, oh, like, you're not going to a big college or big university like everyone else and everything, so you're different and stuff. But I'd always have to remind myself, like, you don't have to be like everyone else. You don't have to be like the world. You don't have to be like all the guys that want to get,
we're not supposed to be,
all the girls and yeah. And so I kind of took pride in that, and like going to a small school, working my way through college, and being able to pay for it on my own. My dad did help me a little bit to start with, but just being able to pay for it on my own and say like, hey, I worked hard for this and everything. And but yeah, that's kind of one thing that just kind of was a turn off about going to a big university, or
just the crowd. Yeah,
was just the crowd and
the mindset.
and the mindset, and just I'm always reminded by one of our pastors at church that if you flirt with temptation, you're probably going to lose. Very slim chance that you win, and so wanted to kind of cut that out of my life.
Kind of ties back into that going in, if we fall, whatever type of mindset.
And that's just such a bad mindset to have. Like you don't want to go in, even though we're sinners and we are going to sin, you don't want to go in with the mindset of, well, I know I mess up, but when I do mess up, like, you want to go in with the mindset of like Jesus, like, I'm going to try to be perfect. And if I'm not, I'm going to rely on his grace and his strength to get me through and to help me get up and try again.
But you don't abuse it.
Absolutely not. No.
But I think we should segue back. We can talk about college.
Sorry, my bad, brother.
No, you're good.
That's
I'm just saying I could rant on that.
That's for another day.
We can get into, you mentioned a thing about meeting family early on. I want to hear, what do you think about?
So,
when do you think you should introduce to family, or what's your opinion?
I think it should be later on, and not probably now. Granted, this was really hard for me because the second relationship I was in, her mom worked at the school as a teacher, and so I already knew her, and I already knew her dad, and her sister went to school there too. It was a small school, and so I kind of already knew. But I would say,
just trying to be quiet as well.
I would say, it needs to be later on, like maybe probably about 6 months in, maybe. Well, that's actually way too long now that I'm thinking about it.
Well, why do you think? Why do you think you should wait? What's your?
I think you should wait because I think you should know. You should focus on getting to know the person a lot. Because at the end of the day, I feel like meeting family is something, something special, and just something that
Sure.
needs to be like, if you're meeting someone's family, it's like, hey, this person is, like, I really like this person, and I want y'all to meet him. Like, you're almost like presenting them in a way. That's kind of weird, but like, it's like you want them to meet this person. But
what about going and picking them up for a date? Like,
oh, that's completely different.
My opinion, like, I think parents, maybe you should meet early on just to be like, I'm the one who's hanging out with your daughter, like, type of thing.
Maybe I should have rephrased that. That's my bad.
Or you mean like
if you're
extended family?
Like for a get together at like
you shouldn't be
like having a bunch of family over for a get together, and hey, my girlfriend's gonna be there.
Yeah, you shouldn't be plugged in a family function.
I don't think that very early on is good.
Yeah.
Now, just meeting like mom and dad, you're picking up on a date, and they're saying, "Oh, hey, something like that." That's fine.
Yeah.
But
I think that's important. I think you should, because it's just kind of a respectful thing.
Absolutely. No, yeah. And I should have reworded that, or rephrased that. But in terms of like a big get together, like I'm gonna invite them to our function, or like, hey, it's Christmas, come to my family's thing. Like that should be later on in the relationship, to where it's kind of more serious in a way. Mm-hmm. Like kind of maybe like they've been together for a while. They have a solid foundation so far, and maybe they're kind of trying to think about like, hey, could we have this future together and everything? And that maybe is probably the best time to when you say like, hey, come to my family function. But in terms of just like, hey, I'm gonna go meet, like I'm gonna go pick so and so up on a date, and their parents are there, and you can meet them. That's completely different. But in terms of like grandparents and aunts and uncles, and
you think about it, can kind of look bad if like some girl for like a week, you just keep bringing new girls every family function.
And that and like, it's a bad look, and they're gonna kind of think like, man, like he can't keep anybody around.
Sure.
And so,
I can say I kind of made that mistake. I think the last girl I talked to, the one that I wasn't in a relationship with, this was after the kind of serious relationship. The one that I thought was like perfect type thing, that was super great with my parents, all that kind of thing. We didn't even know, it was like a month for the time that we kind of talked, and then she disappeared. Like, she met my family that was down here, because they actually ended up coming up for something, and she got to meet all of them. She came and had dinner with all of them, and then she also got to meet some other family that like ended up coming over, and she was over, so they just ended up meeting. And I think I rushed it too quick with that, and I think I kind of freaked her out with that and scared her off, because she was like, this is moving too fast. I also pushed a lot of boundaries too, with pushing the line of things. So I think you're right. I think that's moving too fast sometimes.
I think it all just depends, but I definitely say reserve that for a time well later on, if you can help it. I think that would help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you would like to
add?
Or talk about anything you want to.
Man, not really with that. There's just so many things that through that entire time, went through my mind and everything.
Well, I appreciate having you on.
That's about it.
I think we should do another one together, talking about maybe lust in particular, just like kind of like on our own, not like in relationship stuff, but I think that this was really good. I need to get better at the intro type of thing. Like, I did this with Will too. I'm starting to get this out of my comfort zone again too, because I haven't done this in a while. I'm not used to it. And it's hard to start it. Like, I guess like start the video.
And bro, when I introduced myself, I didn't really like, hey, I'm Hunter, I'm 20 years old, like this is what I'm doing. I just kind of was like, I'm Dalton's friend, and Dalton's great, and everything like that. But
they know who Sharon is. What are you talking about?
Hey, Sharon, bro. he came up with the nickname Sharon, and it's kind of stuck. And now everyone at work calls it Sharon now, and calls me Sharon. But yeah, either way, it's just kind of stuck. So
all right,
but
I appreciate having
either
you
way,
on.
brother, I appreciate it. Glad I was able to talk to you, bro.